Vault Veritas. SCP Files. Episode 103. It Watches. Incident Report 1620-16. 16th known incident report involving SCP-1620, colloquially known as Reflection Infection. Object Class: Euclid. Risk Assessment Level: Moderate. Reported by Rita Baker, Civilian. Report made October 21st, 2022. I can't shake the feeling that my little sister, Tiffany Baker, is dead. Either dead or torn apart by whatever that thing was that wore her reflection. I'm going to walk into her apartment and find her body, and that will be the end of all my hopes and dreams for our future. Though, I suppose it isn't the first time I've thought her dead, so perhaps she'll surprise me again. Perhaps it's all in my head, and I'll open the door to find her happy and smiling. She'll laugh at me for being ever so silly and barging in on her. I've been told many times that I worry too much. The last time I lost her, I thought she would never resurface. My weekly calls into her prison were expensive, grainy, and plagued by terrible lag, but it was worth every penny to stay in touch. She'd made a mistake, that was all. A terrible mistake, yes, but she was remorseful. I was not about to lose my sister over it. It was only 6 months into her sentence when she told me about a special program. Participate in it, and she'd be released early. Not a few months early either. 3.5 years. Just 1 year in this program, and she'd be free again. Naturally, I had all sorts of questions. What was the program? Who had approached her? Was it being run by the government? What exactly would she be doing? Where would she be staying? She couldn't answer any of it. She didn't know. But the promise of 3.5 years off her sentence blinded her to any danger. I tried to be reasonable. I explained that those questions were rather important, and that perhaps she ought not to volunteer for anything that neither of us understood. But once again, she laughed and told me that I simply worry too much, and that she had already signed the paperwork. That was my last call with Tiff for a full year. Wherever they took her, whatever they had her doing, I was never told. When I called the prison demanding answers, they informed me that there had never been a Tiffany Baker incarcerated there. Her records were gone, and so was she. I searched for her. I nearly got myself arrested more than once, walking into government offices and demanding to know what had happened to my sister. I called lawyers. I filed reports. I spent money I didn't have chasing leads that went nowhere. But as the months stretched on and nobody would even acknowledge that Tiffany had existed in the first place, well, I imagined all sorts of terrible things. And eventually, I began to wonder if my sister had died. In the end, I did the only thing I could do. I waited, anxiously, for the end of her mysterious assignment to arrive. And then finally, she video called me again. The year had aged her terribly. She had been 24 when she disappeared, and at 25, she looked far older than I did at 30. There were wrinkles around her eyes, rivers of gray through her hair, but she was alive, and that was truly all that mattered. She told me that after her release, she had been given an apartment and a job stocking shelves at a grocery store. She said she was healthy, though tired all the way down to her bones, and she couldn't remember a single thing that had happened to her over the previous year. It was strange, of course, but that first call with her again was wonderful. I tried my best to hold back my tears of relief. And of course, when they came anyway, she gave that warm, familiar laugh and told me, affectionately, that I worry too much. I've been trying to remember whether there was anything wrong with that first call. It feels like there should have been. In my memory, it seems impossible that I could have missed it. Perhaps her reflection did lag behind her movements. But if so, I didn't notice it. Perhaps at that point it was still her reflection. Or perhaps whatever had been living in her reflection, in that mirror that sat directly behind her, had only just arrived, and it was still mimicking her perfectly. Either way, I did not notice anything strange. Not then. The following week was the first time I truly saw it. Tiffany was telling me about her new life. She was excited, truly thrilled about the most mundane parts of her new freedom. She'd been furnishing her apartment almost entirely from things people had left out on the sidewalk, and she couldn't wait to tell me all about them. The tour of her findings included the mirror. She turned her camera to show it to me. It was a tall, standing mirror with a dark wooden frame, scratched badly along the bottom. She laughed again as she explained that it had been so heavy that she'd had to drag it home across the pavement. Now it sat against the wall behind her, held firmly in place by a huge nail she'd driven directly into a wall stud. She told me it was perfect, ugly scratches and all. She needed a way to see her full outfit before she left home each day. As she talked, I found myself becoming distracted, not by her, but by the reflection. At first, I couldn't quite place what was wrong with it. There was just a feeling, something that made my stomach flip and dance. Eventually, she raised her hand to gesture, and the reflection raised its hand too, a full second later. I remember sitting there, staring. She laughed at something she'd said. Then the reflection laughed too, another second later. Tiffany must have asked me a question. It wasn't until she repeated my name twice that I snapped back to reality. I asked her if her internet was lagging. It was the only explanation I could think of. She laughed again, and told me that it probably was. Her internet sucked after all. And besides, I worried too much. I was probably overthinking it, and I knew at that time that I probably was. The third call happened only a few days later. Tiffany was happier than I'd seen her in years. She loved her new job. She told me that it felt good to be useful, to have people ask her questions and trust her answers, to help someone find the soup aisle or carry groceries to their car and feel like she genuinely improved another person's day. It wasn't glamorous. She wasn't making much money, but she liked it. She even liked the rude customers. She told me, laughing, that they were the best part of her job. She could improve their bad days. She told me it felt like a win every time she got one of them to smile. That's when I noticed the reflection again. Every time she turned her head, it turned just a little too late. Every time she laughed and flipped her hair back, the reflection followed a moment afterward. The delay wasn't much, usually less than a second. Enough that I tried to convince myself I was just imagining it. But I couldn't stop staring. So eventually, I asked if she'd do me a favor. I asked if she could just give me a little wave. I told her I was probably just seeing things. I was tired after all. She rolled her eyes dramatically with a hugely exaggerated sigh, but she waved. The reflection paused, and then it waved too. I studied it. It was no more than the back of her head, her shoulders and arms, and her chair. It all looked right enough. Tiffany called me paranoid. And then she reminded me, once again, that I worried too much. So I let it go again. A week later, she called me unexpectedly, just to catch up. After all, we'd lost a year. She spent most of the call asking about me. Where had I gone? Who had I spent time with? What had I been doing while she'd been gone? I tried to answer. I really did. But my answers were half-hearted at best, because I couldn't stop looking at the mirror. You see, the reflection had changed. It wasn't sitting the same way Tiffany was anymore. It had turned slightly in the chair, just enough that I could see part of its face, the soft curve of her cheek. Tiffany sat facing directly toward me, and slowly, behind her, the reflection began to rotate towards the camera and towards me. I couldn't see its eyes, not yet, but there appeared the edge of her mouth and then the corner of her eye. I stared and stared and fumbled my way through every answer until finally Tiffany interrupted me to ask what the hell was wrong with me today. So, I told her. I didn't want to scare her, of course, but I could feel that something was really, really wrong with that mirror. She sighed, and then she turned in her chair to look at it. And as she turned, the reflection turned too, perfectly, completely in time with her movements, as though nothing had ever been wrong. She tested it, waving and moving, leaning this way and that. The reflection copied everything flawlessly. I stared at it, waiting for something to happen, for it to move oddly or jerk or lag. But it copied her exactly. Finally, she nodded to herself and then turned back to face me. And for one moment, one awful, impossible moment, both Tiffany and her reflection were facing toward me at the same time. It caught my gaze and stared, unsmiling. I knew with absolute certainty that whatever was sitting in that mirror was no longer my sister's reflection. And it knew that I knew. It held my gaze for another second. Then, slowly, it turned away and resumed its imitation of her back. I begged her then, starting to babble. I told her that something was wrong, really, really wrong. She needed to get rid of the mirror, now, right now. Instead, she sighed, a tired, broken sound, and asked me why I couldn't simply be happy for her. I told her that I was, and that I was happier than I'd been in years. I'd gotten her back. I'd gotten her back when I was utterly convinced she had died, and I didn't want to lose her again over whatever this nonsense was. We argued. I'm ashamed to admit that I yelled. As we fought, she looked increasingly hurt, like a little puppy that couldn't believe its master was admonishing it. Eventually, I ended up apologizing. I told her that I was just stressed and tired, and of course, that I was worried. Because what else could I say? I knew how insane I sounded, and I couldn't afford to push her away, not while that thing was still there, listening and watching and mimicking her movements. After that, she stopped calling. So eventually, I called her, and this time, I recorded the conversation. I didn't tell her, of course. I didn't want to scare her or push her away any further. But I needed proof. I needed someone else to see what I was seeing. Tiff was tired, so I tried my best to make up for the enthusiasm she lacked. I think I mostly just babbled at her. I talked about work, both hers and mine, about the crazy weather we'd been having, about the new TV show I'd started watching but didn't really like. And all the while, I watched that reflection like a hawk. It didn't move. The entire time I watched it, and that awful thing did not move an inch. You see, it knew. It knew that something was different, that I was watching for it now and trying to catch it misbehaving. I even watched the recording back afterward, frame by frame, begging for any hint of abnormality. Nothing. It seemed like whatever was living in that mirror was smart enough to know when it was being hunted. Not that that changed my approach. It was a damned mirror. I wasn't about to let it outsmart me. I'd simply have to try again. The next time I called, I was ready, I had my cursor hovering over the record button. I decided that the moment I saw anything wrong, I'd capture it. But the instant Tiffany answered, that thought left my mind entirely. The reflection was no longer pretending. It had turned around fully. It wasn't sitting where Tiffany sat anymore, either. It was offset by several inches, sitting beside her instead of behind her, and it was looking directly at me. It wore my sister's face, but no human being has ever smiled like that. I screamed. I don't remember what I screamed, only that I was suddenly pointing at my monitor and begging Tiffany to turn around. She did, and she looked directly at her reflection. The thing looked at her. Then it looked back at me, and I swear to God that awful smile widened. Tiffany spat a curse at me as she turned back around, telling me not to do that again, that I'd scared her. But even as she tried to dismiss me, I begged her to cover it. She had to cover the mirror. With a tired sigh, she agreed. Then she stood up and walked out of frame. The reflection remained seated, still smiling and still watching me back. I didn't breathe. I stared at it, and it stared at me, motionless, not even moving to blink. I kept willing it to stay put, to not go after her, to just stay here and keep my gaze. And somehow, mercifully, it did. It sat and waited patiently until Tiffany returned, carrying a thick gray blanket, and draped it over the mirror, disappearing the creature entirely. The rest of the call was better. Not good, but definitely better. She kept trying to end it, but I refused to let her leave and hang up. I needed to know that everything was okay. And it was. We talked about the new car she wanted to buy. We talked about her new hobby of painting. We talked about my recent promotion. And as we talked, and things went back to normal, I could see some color creep back into her cheeks. It seemed, at that moment, that everything was going to be okay. Then, she mentioned she was a mite peckish, and picked up her laptop to walk into the kitchen. She sat me down on the counter, facing the sink, and I stopped speaking mid-sentence. There, in the mirror over the sink, stood her reflection, still facing me, still smiling, waiting. I don't really remember what I said, or more like what I screamed. Only that Tiff told me she wasn't going to answer my calls anymore. She told me I need to talk to someone, that I'm clearly seeing things, that I need professional help, or something along those lines. To be honest, I wasn't really following at all. I only remember that during that argument, behind her, the reflection slowly raised one finger. It looked directly at me, and then it pressed the finger gently against its throat. In a slow, sweeping movement, it drew it across, never breaking eye contact. I've been calling and calling since then. Nobody picks up the phone. It may be because she's simply upset at me, but somehow I know in my heart, once again, that she is dead. I'm leaving this account for whoever comes looking for me when I stop showing up to work. I know I shouldn't go. I know that if something happened to Tiffany, then whatever happened to her could easily happen to me. I don't know how one fights a reflection. Do I break every mirror, every window, bend every spoon, smash every piece of glass? What if it's everywhere beyond her home, too? I don't know. I just don't have any answers at all. Maybe, like always, I'm just worrying too much. But she's my sister, my little sister. And if she's still there, if she's scared or hurt or hiding, then I have to go looking. Because I already lost her once. And I don't think I could survive losing her twice. No. Let me try... I can find no record of Rita or Tiffany Baker in the database. No follow-up investigation, no police reports, no obituary. Nothing. There is, however, extensive documentation on the Foundation's database regarding SCP-1620 itself, a rectangular sheet of metal alloy, torn and jagged along one edge. There are dozens of testing logs from back in September of 2022. But without Tiffany's designation, there's no way to determine which records, if any, belong to her. Or why she was released following exposure. Perhaps it was an accident. Perhaps she was exposed and nobody realized it. What's really strange is that, according to the documentation, everyone survives. These parasitic reflective entities associated with SCP-1620 appear to exist only to frighten and distress their hosts. After approximately 9 weeks, they simply die, and the host survives unharmed. So it stands to reason that the Baker sisters are alive and well. And yet, I'm not entirely sure why or how, but I don't think that's true. If I concentrated on that feeling, really concentrated, I think I might be able to tell you exactly what happened in Tiffany's apartment. I think I might be able to tell you what Rita found when she opened the door. What was waiting for her in the hundreds of mirrors she found adorning the walls. But I don't think I really want to know. Because if I'm right, then I know that whatever was looking out at her that night wasn't truly trying to hurt Tiffany or her, but it was trying to escape. It was trying to get out, to sever all connections and slip back out into the world, to infect every piece of glass, every reflective surface it could find. If you'll excuse me, I think I need to go and cover the mirror in my bathroom now.
Vault Veritas SCP Files is a podcast inspired by the SCP Foundation. It Watches is based on SCP-1620 by the Glyphstone from the SCP Wiki located at scpwiki.com/SCP-1620. It is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike 3.0 unported license. This episode featured Justin Gellner as Scott Anderson. It was written and edited by Leola Angel. We welcome comments. Please rate and review us, email us at vaultveritas@gmail.com, or join our Discord channel using the link in the episode description. Thanks for listening.